Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So let me get this straight. She and her family flee war-torn Somalia, where 500,000 are killed during a civil war, then sent to a refugee camp in Kenya for 4 years. They are then resettled by our government in Virginia to enjoy the cornucopia of rights, privileges, and benefits the United States offers. The she is Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who represents Minnesota's 5th Congressional District in Congress only about 2 months. But she's gotten attention far beyond Washington for her anti-Semitism. But as early as 2012, she tweeted, quote, "Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel." Now, after an uproar in her home state, she apologized, pledging to learn more about anti-Semitism. Apparently, she did not. Once in Congress, she continued with her hate-filled anti-Semitic, anti-Israel tropes. First, in defending the BDS, or Boycott, Divest, and Sanction movement, calling for the boycott of events in Israel, and even for the eradication of Israel because of their so-called oppression of Palestine. Shortly thereafter, she tweets, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby." Benjamins, of course, a clear reference to the $100 bill. Shortly after that, she continues her hate-filled rants, accusing another Democrat congresswoman of having a dual loyalty, pledging allegiance to Israel. She is clever, though, responding with, quote, "I am told I am anti-American if I am not pro-Israel," close quote. The House knew it had to take action. And after a week of chaos on the part of House members trying to figure out if Omar should be reprimanded, identified by name, as well as removed from the powerful Foreign Relations Committee, Speaker Pelosi comes out with a watered-down, dumb, disappointing resolution that neither condemns Omar nor mentions her name. A simple, "We shouldn't hate each other."
I don't think our colleague is anti-Semitic. I think she has a different experience in the use of words, doesn't understand that some of them are fraught with meaning that she didn't realize.
Nancy, she speaks perfect English. She graduated from a college in the United States. You say she doesn't understand the words? Are you saying she's stupid? That she doesn't understand? Then what the hell is she doing on the prestigious Foreign Relations Committee? She speaks fluently, using tropes which are figurative and metaphorical, understanding that those words create powerful images and verbal ironies. She is far from stupid. She is clear and pointed in her hatred. Her comments only critical of Jews and Israel, not Italy, not Morocco, not North Korea, Israel. Now, the fact that you didn't have the backbone, grit, or gumption to draft a resolution that included her name tells me you're the stupid one. And if you don't understand, let me explain. Omar got you and all your pals to draft a watered-down resolution with a message we all learned in first grade. Don't hate anybody. Really? That took you bozos a week in the House? And yet you were so quick to admonish a white male Republican congressman accused of hate and strip him of his committee assignments. She then goes on to accuse respected members of Congress who support Israel, our strongest ally in the Middle East, of dual loyalty. What she's doing, Nancy, is starting a movement to shut down pro-Israel speech, making it politically incorrect. So when she comes up with her pro-Palestinian agenda, the pro-Israels are reticent to speak because she's already proven that the Dems will not punish her. And talk about chutzpah, she takes a victory lap and in an unrepentant and unchastised tweet takes credit by saying, quote, "Our nation is having a difficult conversation, but we believe this is great progress." But she continues her disdain and contempt for Israel, America's chief ally, ignoring how Israel has assisted us advancing our interests in the Middle East, preventing victories by radical nationalist movements, as well as assisting us in intelligence gathering. She then goes on to slam Barack Obama, saying he's just another pretty face who got away with murder, caging kids and droning people in the Middle East. But she adds he is a bit more polished. My question, why the disdain for the government of the country that saved you and your family after you lived in a tent in Kenya for 4 years? Why the scorn? And as the Democrats scramble to forgive, rationalize, and give a pass to a freshman in Congress, the joke is on you, Nancy. You've appeased rising anti-Semitism inside the Democrat Party. Let me say that again. You and the whole gang running for president in the Democratic primary in 2020 have appeased the rise of anti-Semitism in the Democrat Party. The sad part is that all this is contrary to the tenets of your party, which is so receptive to the LGBTQ community, illegal immigrants, refugees, and on and on. This is not who your party is. Your party is not anti-Israel. She is. Think about this. She's not getting this anti-Israel sentiment doctrine from the Democrat Party. So if it's not rooted in the party, where is she getting it from? Think about it. Omar wears a hijab, which according to the Quran 33:59 tells women to cover so they won't get molested. Is her adherence to this Islamic doctrine indicative of her adherence to Sharia law, which in itself is antithetical to the United States Constitution? I don't have to tell you, Nancy. Jews have been persecuted almost from the beginning of time, when they were forced out of Egypt, to the 6 million killed in the Holocaust, and now we are witnessing the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe, where incidents are up 74% in the last year alone in France, where Jewish cemeteries are regularly desecrated with swastikas, and people relay the common tropes of Jews with too much money and influence. We all know how it starts. It starts that way. Hate is hate. Hate leads to violence. and violence leads to retaliation, which then leads to unrest and worse. Yes, Nancy, it's all about hating Israel to promote the cause of Palestine. President Trump was right when he said the Democrat Party is now the anti-Israel party. And don't forget, Nancy, history has proven over and over, when you appease anti-Semitic sentiment, the worst happens. And in your case, Nancy, the danger for you is that your appeasing this behavior will lead to your removal as Speaker. And the Democrats, now controlled by socialists and anti-Semites, will lose the presidency in 2020.
It is Monday, the 11th of March of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. It's been truly another one of those weekends, as they all have been since a certain orange-haired monstrosity has been appointed to, well, be leader of the free world, so to speak. And, at the top there, of course, that was Jeanine Pirro, without one semblance of self-awareness. Of course, that is endemic in the right wing, isn't it? A lack of self-awareness. You would think there'd be a filter somewhere there, but there is not. I don't quite understand. Ilhan Omar's hijab means she has dual loyalties? Well, what about the Catholic nun that taught me in Catholic school, in the habit? Did she have a dual loyalty? I remember back in the day, John Kennedy had to go in front of the American people and prove he did not have dual loyalties. Here is Jeanine Pirro, supposedly a Catholic, and she is not self-aware enough to really listen to what she's saying, because racist Islamophobes never do. And that's exactly what Jeanine Pirro is. She is perpetuating the anti-Semitic myth of dual loyalties. Jews have been accused of that really from the beginning of the founding of our nation. Indeed. So thanks, Jeanine, for reminding us of, why Fox is a propaganda network and not a news organization, okay? And let's not also forget that a Fox affiliate had to go to court to protect themselves from a charge. And their argument was they can lie because they are not a news organization. I know that the big national corporation says, that was just a little affiliate. And I'm thinking, yeah. And all your other little affiliates feel the same way now, don't they? They do. What's on the rest of the menu? That was quite a bit of Jeanine Pirro, but I want you to get the full flavor of her vitriol, how bitter it was. Ugh. Well, on the rest of the menu, starting off here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Trump's National Golf Club at Washington, D.C., has been illegally chopping down and then dumping protected trees in the Potomac River. He loves America, doesn't he? The top Air Force official who slammed Trump's Space Force suddenly quits. I wonder why. And Trump officials won't talk to Congress about the sexual abuse of the kids they stole. They won't. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the trial of Ilhan al-Hathloul, one of nearly a dozen prominent Saudi Arabian women's rights activists detained since last year, will begin on Wednesday. And the spokesman for the leading Rwandan opposition politician Victoire Ingabire has been found dead. Well, how convenient. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is our contribute button. And please do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your recurring contribution keeps the lights on and the bills paid, and Resistance Radio resisting as the founders originally intended. So we do thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we are thankful that he does that. I can be found on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and the show notes and links diary is posted on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then links on social media comes up shortly after that, or sometimes not so shortly. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Get podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. There's so many of them, but those are the major ones right there. So thank you. All right, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays, by the way. It's not just a bunch of leftovers, okay? Well, it's with some leftovers. Was, select, shall we say. Okay. Trump National Golf Club in Washington, D.C., they don't care about trees or the environment or the law. Well, I would say that at none of Trump's properties do they care about any of that. Late last month, the Trump Organization decided to clear-cut a bunch of large trees at Trump National, D.C., its golf course in Loudoun County, Virginia. Then they just threw all the trees in the Potomac River. However, it turns out that it was a protected area, and therefore removing the trees, not to mention throwing them in the river, was completely illegal. First, there's the part where tossing the trees in the river is a safety hazard. Then there's the fact that regulations require permits to cut down trees in that part of the river because it is designated as being prone to flood. Next, this was no small removal operation. Loudoun County officials said that the golf course cleared nearly 3/4 of an acre of land. Finally, removing the trees leads to increased sediment in the water and ends up eventually polluting the Chesapeake Bay. Does Trump care about any of that? Of course not. Apparently, Trump believes his golf courses should not be beholden to any laws, environmental or otherwise. His clubs, for example, employ a massive amounts of undocumented immigrants, even as Trump viciously rails against the immigrants who enter at our southern border. Trump also battled the government of Scotland for years because he believed the presence of wind turbines to be an abomination. And at his Bedminster golf course in New Jersey, or actually Bedminster golf course in New Jersey, he was cited by the state's Department of Environmental Protection when he cut down trees and disturbed wetlands. This isn't even the first time that this particular golf course was in the news for clearing trees. Back in 2011, the Washington Post reported that the Trump Organization had mowed down over 400 trees along the Potomac River. Also, that the people paying $100,000 to join and another $700 per month to be members could have a better view of the water. Yet in a thoroughly Trumpian move, They replaced some of those giant trees with a giant American flag. And in the process, they created an environmental nightmare, leaving migratory birds and bald eagles with nowhere to go. Not much, it seems, has changed since 2011 at the golf course, which Trump has visited over 40 times since becoming president. Oliver Willis of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe, a West Coast cookbook and speakeasy. You know, in the Trump administration, true competence is abhorred in their realm. True competence has to be rooted out, and if it isn't rooted out and removed, trust me, it will remove itself. Air Force Secretary Heather Wilson is resigning her position for a job in academia, leaving yet another major military position open under Trump. Wilson is reportedly leaving to become the president of the University of Texas at El Paso. Trump has had a extremely high turnover rate at top government positions, as his haphazard and inept style has proven to be difficult to work with. Positions that were highly coveted in other administrations cannot be filled under Trump. The U.S. hasn't even had a Secretary of Defense since Jim Mattis quit at the beginning of the year, slamming Trump's reckless foreign policy and approach to military affairs on his way out. There were reports of friction between Trump and Wilson because she was opposed to Space Force, Trump's much-derided plan to create a sixth branch of the military to handle space operations. The Pentagon is complicated enough, Wilson said in June of 2017. This will make it more complex, add more boxes to the organization chart, and cost more money. And if I had more money, I would put it into lethality, not bureaucracy. I need another chief of staff and another 6 deputy chiefs of staff. Last year, Trump was reportedly angered by Wilson's stance and saw it as a campaign to undermine his precious Space Force idea, and he even considered firing her over it. Trump recently pushed the Pentagon to request $2 billion in taxpayer funds to waste on the Space Force, which he has used as an applause line at rallies and to sell campaign merchandise. Trump also declined to nominate Wilson for the still vacant position of Secretary of Defense. And in this reporter's opinion, it's mostly because Vlad really hasn't gotten around to it yet. Trump has been negligent on military matters during his presidency and has been derisive and abusive towards soldiers and veterans. Wilson's departure further highlights the ever-increasing dysfunction that surrounds Trump, especially in vital topics like national defense. Offering here in the Bistro Cafe, a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays is also brought to us by Oliver Willis from Share Blue Media. I swear to God, in this reporter's opinion, and also just as me as an individual, if these people don't go to jail for these crimes, we ought to make sure that we as a constituency make sure that it does. Okay? Truly. After reports of thousands of instances of alleged abuse, the Trump team is stonewalling a congressional inquiry. Officials in the Trump administration are refusing to meet with members of Congress to discuss serious allegations of sexual abuse of migrant children. They project so much, don't they? All these stories of kids being sexually trafficked in a basement at Comet Pizza. Yeah, okay. It wasn't a pizza parlor. Okay, maybe in some of these prior incarnations, there was a pizza parlor in these malls that ICE have taken over and turned into detention facilities. Maybe. The facilities where abuse has been alleged to take place are supervised by the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Oh, the guy that just quit that. Just recently here, that young guy who's like some sort of Christian fanatic and went to court to prevent young girls from being able to get abortions after they've been raped. Maybe they're harvesting kids somehow too. It's just so sick. You don't know what is the extent of their depravity. And that's also, once again, the Office of Refugee Resettlement is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. And the current HHS secretary was nominated by Trump is Alex Azar. Now, the office or the Health and Human Services own data shows that the department has received 4,500 allegations of sexual abuse and harassment since 2015. And Representative Ted Deutsch of Florida, revealed the data at a February hearing. Together, these documents detail an environment of systemic sexual assault by staff on unaccompanied children, Deutsch said. Now get what the GOP is arguing about here. Despite this horrific information, the HHS officials won't meet with Congress. Instead, HHS is making the excuse that they want a correction and an apology from Deutsch because he referred to the alleged predators as staff when they were contract employees of the shelters in question. That's not a cage. It's a detention area. They fight about semantics because they know that they're going to jail for human rights abuses. At the initial hearing, Deutsch clarified his statement and noted it doesn't make what happened any less horrific. The bottom line is that migrant children were harmed in U.S. custody, and the U.S. government is ultimately responsible for their treatment, whether the staff were perpetrators or whether the perpetrators were staff or contractors. And I got to tell you, when I was a contract employee, they called me staff. If I wore a little nameplate and said, "Hey, I'm working right here. How can I help you?" Give me a break. The HHS argument comes across as a disingenuous dodge and an attempt to avoid oversight. The Trump administration, aided by its Republican allies in Congress, have struck out against attempts by Congress to provide oversight. The Trump administration detained children, often in cages, after it decided to shift policy from previous administrations and prosecute all border crossers, even those who are legally here to apply for asylum. They're all illegals now, especially if they're brown. Now that same administration, faced with the possibility that those children are being preyed upon, is avoiding oversight, investigation, and responsibility. Azar's department already has a track record of simply not caring about the fates of these children, including losing records about their whereabouts after they were stolen from their parents. It is a state of affairs that recently led Representative Elijah Cummings, chair of the House Oversight Committee, to describe the administration's actions as government-funded child abuse. And I think that possibly the Trump administration is rubbing their hands in glee and saying, finally, someone agrees with us. Children are being hurt, and not enough is being done to protect them. Trump's team is not helping the children, while letting the would-be abusers get away with their crimes. Well, it's not the first time now, is it? Epstein. All right, let's get to our break. And when we come back, we're going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. It sounds like a witch's recipe. Gather the hearts of a fence lizard, a little brown bat, a naked-tailed armadillo, and dozens of others.
So initially we tried to get them from zoo, but unfortunately that didn't work out very well. We couldn't get any samples. Even when the animal died, we couldn't get a heart.
Guo Huang, a developmental biologist at the University of California, San Francisco. He says they had more success obtaining specimens from the jars of natural history museums. But the reason for this biological scavenger hunt? Huang and his colleagues wanted to examine the number of chromosomes contained in heart cells across the animal kingdom. Because there's a curious phenomenon in our hearts, which is that most of the human body's cells are diploid, meaning 2 sets of chromosomes, one from each parent, but the lion's share of our heart cells are actually polyploid, meaning 2 or more copies from mom, 2 or more copies from dad. What Huang and his team found, looking at that collection of hearts, is that the proportion of polyploid cells in a heart goes up as you go from fish to lizards to amphibians to transitional species like platypuses to mammals. The reason that finding might matter to us is that recent studies in mice and zebrafish have shown that hearts with more diploid cells, like a zebrafish's, are actually able to regenerate and heal themselves. Hearts with more polyploid cells, like mice and humans, cannot. So what makes a heart have more polyploid cells and thus less chance of regenerating?
That's actually a million-dollar question.
But one answer Huang's team found is that thyroid hormone, the same hormone that regulates metabolism and makes us warm-blooded creatures, might be to blame. Because when they added extra thyroid hormone to zebrafish's tanks, their tiny hearts were no longer able to regenerate. And conversely, when they engineered mice to have hearts that were insensitive to thyroid hormone, the mouse hearts could regenerate back after injury.
When we look at the heart function, which is mainly measured by contractility of the heart, we can see the heart function improve over time after injury, while control mice cannot improve.
The results are in the journal Science. As for fixing human hearts, perhaps manipulating thyroid hormone levels could be a start.
We know regulating thyroid hormone probably alone is not sufficient to cure heart disease, at least for promote heart regeneration completely. And if we can figure out other major regulator of this process, we might be in a better shape.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
In prisons and jails, who ends up in solitary confinement? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. At a recent public hearing before the Massachusetts legislature about solitary confinement, a former inmate explained, quote, "If you have a disagreement with a correctional officer and they don't like you, you're going to the hole. They tell you to do something and you don't do it fast enough. You're going to the hole. They come to do the count and you don't stand up quick enough. Later that night, they come to your cell, and you're going to the hole." The hole is solitary confinement. It's an apt description. Last year, the Massachusetts legislature passed a law to restrict and reduce the use of solitary confinement in Massachusetts prisons and jails. But as that recent hearing demonstrates, the Department of Correction has found ways to skirt the law, including locking up a person in a cage for 21 or 22 instead of 23 hours a day and calling that confinement something else. As Jesse White, an attorney with Prisoners Legal Services of Massachusetts, said, quote, "The Department of Corrections intends to bring itself into technical compliance with the letter of the law while subverting the intention of the law and continuing to rely on solitary confinement as a linchpin of management practices." The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. It was a tragic day of history repeating itself. An explosion occurred deep inside the Macbeth mine in Logan, West Virginia. In the immediate aftermath, the bodies of 2 miners were recovered. Rescue crews scrambled to locate and save the other trapped miners confined in the mine. But the explosion had occurred 2 miles from the mine's entrance, making rescue extremely difficult and dangerous. Newspapers from the region reporting on the rescue efforts painted a grim picture. The Eugene Register Guard painted a heartbreaking picture of stumbling rescue crews, so worn out they could only speak with difficulty of the terrors of the explosion in the deep pit. In all, 18 miners lost their lives on this date. For the miners and their families, the day was cruelly tragic. For just 6 months earlier, on September 2nd, an explosion had occurred at the very same mine, claiming the lives of 10 of their comrades. The September explosion was blamed on a spark from a cart hauling the coal. It ignited the dangerous gases that saturate the air in the mines. The company claimed the mine was safe and the methane gas problem had been solved. But the second explosion likely had the same cause. In West Virginia alone, there have been more than 90 recorded mine explosions, resulting in thousands of deaths since 1886. The worst disaster occurred in 1907, when an explosion at the Monongah mine killed 361 workers. In 2010, 29 miners tragically lost their lives in the Upper Big Branch coal mine. Mine workers have been some of the strongest and most vocal participants in the U.S. labor movement. Mine workers and their unions have continually fought and organized for safer working conditions and fair wages for this highly dangerous work. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Monday, March 11th, 2019. I'm Mark Boulanger. One of the major struggles against the privatization of public services has been focused on the right for people to have safe, affordable, accessible water. In Europe, unionists and other activists have been trying to use the EU regulations to secure the right to water with what's called a European Citizens' Initiative. The ECI has been quite successful, but in early March, the EU national environment ministers adopted a very weak text on the right to water. In this, the first of a two-part series, I talked to Jan Willem Houdian. Mr. Houdian is the General Secretary of the European Public Services Union, EPSU.
Let me take you back a little bit to the context in which we started the Right to Water European Citizen Initiative. You will remember that in the 90s and the first decade of this century, we saw attempts, and certainly also in the European Union, to open up public service markets like for railways, post, telecoms, electricity and gas. This also started to happen with water. There were pressures to open the water markets in Europe. At the same time, there was resistance growing across the world from water activists, unions, and others who were building networks, sharing experiences of their struggles, for example, like the Reclaim Public Water Network. Unions in EPSU and also in our global sister federation, PSI, Public Service International, we became involved with our members in many local fights. And actually we were winning. We were getting the arguments across why water services need to be remaining in public hands, or even why privatizations needed to be reversed and bring services back in public ownership. For example, as a group of European activists at the European Social Forum in Malmo in 2008, we adopted a manifesto on water with very clear demands and principles for public water. Unless in 2008 you got the financial and economic crisis, and in Europe as elsewhere, that meant the austerity policies. Well, we all know austerity policies meant cuts in public funding for public services. It puts pressure on public service wages, addressed collective bargaining, but also we saw more privatization. In the European Union, that translated in attempts to get water services included in trade agreements, like the one between the European Union and Canada, but also in attempts by the European Union to promote public-private partnerships, to promote concessions, and to promote public contracts to private companies. So in that context, the European Citizen Initiative, the Right to Water, was one of our responses. And for your listeners who might not remember, a European Citizen Initiative is an instrument which is offered in the European Treaty. And if we would organize 1 million signatures in at least 7 countries, the European Commission and possibly the European Council, the ministers of the different countries, had to respond to the demand. So we took it upon us as EPSU, the European Federation of Public Service Unions, to be one of the first to test this instrument in 2012. That was the first moment it could be tested. Within the ECI and within the work, we brought together many of the water activists, many of the groups who had been active in Malmö, for example, and we try to link what is important for us as workers with issues which are crucial for our families and our communities, and certainly access to safe drinking water is crucial. We knew already because of our experience that this would trigger, a snare, a sensitive nerve with people. And with the ECI, we were also able to link many local and national fights in a common European one. Within the context we had, politically, it was also a way to show a direction forward for us in our struggles against austerity policies. We had a difficult discussion on this with the European Parliament, which improved the language of the Commission slightly, far beyond our ambition, but still a step forward. But as you said, Mark, the ministers weakened it all.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. The Trump administration has reportedly begun asking countries that host American military bases to pay the U.S. according to a new formula that could see host nation costs rise multiple times over if implemented. According to an exclusive report by Bloomberg News, the White House has reportedly instructed negotiators in talks with Germany and Japan to ask for cost plus 50, meaning the full cost of basing U.S. troops plus a 50% markup to enjoy U.S. protection. Scott Anderson is a fellow at the Brookings Institute and a former State Department legal advisor for Middle East policy.
As far as I'm aware, there's no real precedent for a policy like this. And in part, that's because it does not really make any sense.
Anderson says that's because in many cases, host countries aren't the ones begging to have U.S. troops on their territory.
For example, U.S. AFRICOM is based in Germany because it's easier to get from Germany to parts of Africa where it operates. Those sorts of relationships are hard to put a flat across-the-board price tag on, like cost plus 50, because some different types of activities benefit the United States, some benefit the host country, others benefit countries in the region.
It's not clear whether the U.S. has had any success in asking countries to pay cost plus 50, but Anderson worries that even if President Trump intends to settle for a lot less, making the request in the first place undermines America's alliances, which are supposed to represent true and enduring partnerships, not just marriages of convenience.
Negotiating over every bottom dollar as if this were some sort of strict business negotiation just undermines those objectives, especially because you end up only getting these short-term agreements that leave the long-term durability of the policy unclear. And that projects vulnerability to people who you're trying to deter with these sorts of alliances.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh my God. Yes, there's a bit of white crust covering everything as we do have a bit of high humidity, and that will freeze overnight when it's that low. We are looking to be, well, let's see. It won't be so terribly cold today. It'll be in the mid-50s. We're going to have an overnight low of 39. And I actually have to revise that forecast because I've suddenly got a refresh. And it looks like we're going to be expecting a high in the upper 50s to low 60s. Overnight lows do remain at 38 to 39 degrees. We are expected to have about 1/4 inch of rain tonight, and then showers tomorrow, bringing in about another 1/8 inch. Currently, we are clear. Winds are out of the north, light and variable, will increase later on tonight out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then tomorrow will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour as it brings in another, well, like I said, 1/8 inch of rain. Air quality index is in the orange warning moderate range at 67 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is also rated at moderate at 4. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.98 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and that relative humidity is at 94%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world, and they do. Now, the guy just outside of London is registering 50 degrees and fair, even though they're in Celsius. but they have a weather advisory with potential disruption due to wind. And if you've ever been to London, boy, you don't even have to go outside to experience the amount of wind they have there. Oh, I Josh. Paris is 52 and partly cloudy. Rome is 62 and fair, and let's see if they have a problem with wind, because they have a weather advisory, and I'm clicking on that right now. Okay, yes, and a disruption due to extremely low temperatures. Well. What are their low temperatures expected to be? 38 degrees. Wow. Rome, come on. Join the 21st century. That's not enough to get you disrupted. Boy, what a bunch of snowflakes. Kiev is 40 degrees and mostly cloudy with wind. Kabul is 36 with light rain. Hong Kong is 62 and clear. Tokyo is 52 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 74 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 43 and clear, and I bet they have a small craft advisory because there is a weather advisory, and indeed it is for a small craft advisory on the bay and just offshore, so take care. And New York is 45 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny, and they have their own small craft advisory. So do take care. Hold on to your top hats. Button up that top button. Stay warm. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The trial of Loujain al-Hathloul, one of nearly a dozen prominent Saudi Arabian women rights activists detained since last year, will begin on Wednesday, her family said on Twitter. Activists claim some detainees, including the 29-year-old Hathloul, were held in solitary confinement and subjected to mistreatment and torture, including electric shocks, flogging, and sexual assault. Saudi officials have denied those allegations as false, as well they should, because they're the ones who built a crematorium in their embassy and burned Jamal Khashoggi there just to, cover their tracks. 36 countries, including all 28 EU members, called on Riyadh last week to release the activists, the first rebuke of the kingdom at the UN Human Rights Council since it was set up in 2006. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and his British counterpart have also said they had raised the issue with the Saudi authorities during recent visits, and I guess they're still going to give them nukes, right? Let the women go and we'll give you the nukes. I mean, they're all going to get vaporized anyway, right? Right? And then the righteous will be raised to heaven and we'll all live happily ever after. The Saudi government communications office did not immediately respond to a request for comment, but the prosecutor's office said earlier this month it had completed its investigations of the detainees and was preparing for their trials. Well, what was it that the horrendous thing that would have caused them to be put on trial to begin with? Well, insulting the kingdom. And how do you insult the kingdom? Well, I suppose it's fighting for the women's right to drive. And they had to pass the women's right to drive. And now women have the right to drive. But did you know that the activists who push for the right to drive are all detained and are going on trial for insulting the Saudi government and the royal family? Dozens of other activists, intellectuals, and clerics have been arrested separately in the past 2 years in an apparent bid to stomp out opposition to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. who has consolidated power, including a sweeping anti-corruption campaign and the brutal murder of his opponents, especially if they're writing for the Washington Post.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Our final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes our way out of Reuters by Clement Urigina Yemana. The spokesman for leading Rwandan opposition politician Victoire Ingabire has been found dead, a government official said yesterday, Sunday. It was not immediately clear how 30-year-old Anselme Mutuyimana had died, 25 years after a genocide that killed an estimated 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus. Rwandan President Paul Kagame has won international praise for presiding over a peaceful and rapid economic recovery. But he has also faced mounting criticism for what human rights groups say are widespread abuses, a muzzling of independent media, and suppression of political opposition. Of course, he denies those charges. Several dissidents have been found dead inside Rwanda. How convenient. And in exile. Oh, how convenient, even in exile. In unsolved cases in recent years. Wow, this is like the Putin model. Rwandan authorities said they were investigating the death. I'm sure they are, like all the others. The investigation has started. No suspects so far, said the spokesman for the Rwanda Investigation Bureau. Mutuyama's elder brother, Augustin Tumbambazi, told Reuters that the body had no visible wounds but had blood in its mouth. Sounds like a poisoning. In 2014, exiled former Rwandan intelligence chief Patrick Karagaya was found dead after being murdered in a Johannesburg hotel room. Ingabire, who returned from the Netherlands to contest a presidential election in 2010, had previously served 6 years of a 15-year sentence for inciting insurrection. Oh, he tried to run against the guy before, apparently. And another official from the FDU Ngingé party, Jean Damascene Habagorare, had been found dead 2 years ago and the crime had never been solved. Ingabire said that we need justice. She said that witness had described men in police uniforms in a red car detaining her spokesman in western Mahako area. Police did not return calls seeking comment on that report. And of course they're not. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but Netroots Radio, of course, will broadcast on. We're going to meet up tomorrow, of course, for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays, so stay tuned for that. In fact, stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. tendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.